As I told Father Jerry, he stole my whole thunder. I had exactly the same reflection. So you can leave now, yes. Good morning, and thank you for spending time with me this morning and being brave enough to listen to me for the next few minutes reflecting on this Sunday's readings. Trust me, Sister Phyllis, Father Jerry, and Leaf are hard acts to follow. We can all agree on that. I have often heard from some of you that speaking in front of an audience is easier than singing in front of an audience. This is the opposite for me. With music, you can count the beat, know where to come in and start, where to modulate and where to end. It's right there in front of you. Seriously, friends, here at St. Charles, we all have something to say, and we all learn from each other. So let us now begin, as we have before. We remember that we are in the holy presence of God. St. John the Baptist de La Salle, live Jesus in our hearts. Have you ever heard this phrase? Look, I just want to say this to you for your own good. Do these similar words press the beware button in us? The answer probably depends on who is saying it and the tone in which they say the phrase. If it's someone you know well and the person of good heart and integrity, we might be willing to listen to their constructive criticism. But if we sense destructive superiority and self-righteousness in their words, we probably don't want to listen to or hear what they have to say. Do we size up people long before we know them? I do. Here is an example of a story from a blog I found on the internet. A bishop from New York was sailing for Europe. As he went aboard the large ocean liner, he found that another passenger was going to be sharing a cabin with him. After looking around his quarters, he went back up to the purser's desk and asked if he could leave his gold watch and other valuables in the ship's safe. He explained that ordinarily he never did this sort of thing, but he had been to his cabin and had met the man who would occupy the other bed. And judging from his appearance, he was afraid that he might not be a very trustworthy person. The purser accepted the responsibility of caring for the valuables and remarked, "It's all right, Bishop. I'd be very glad to take care of them for you. The other man has just been up here and deposited his valuables for the same reason." In today's gospel, Jesus asks, can a blind guide a blind person, the blind leading the blind? It's not really a great idea, but we are guilty of doing just that in our lives. Jesus calls hypocrites those who notice a tiny splinter in another's eye, but are blind to the plank in their own eye. I don't know about you, but that's gotta hurt. Sure makes my eyes water just thinking about it. And thinking about it, I often find myself looking out instead of looking in. The first reading from Sirach also emphasizes the gospel message of self-awareness. So too does one's speech disclose the bent of one's mind. When put to the test, the decisions we make reflect what's going on in our hearts and minds. In hearing these words, you are getting the essence of the parable. And as an aside, today's readings only come in year C, the 8th Sunday in Ordinary Time, which doesn't happen very often in liturgical cycles. In fact, it's only happened twice since 1970. Figures I would get those readings. These readings put a spotlight on how I am. I know I am guilty of smugness. I just bleat out my point of view to others, sometimes with very little background information. A common Tom phrase would be, what you ought to do is, we have seen in the past few decades with social media and the talking heads in all the media that the world is swimming in an ocean of self-righteousness. Many see themselves as expert when clearly they are not. At times we are unaware or just ignore our shortcomings while decrying the faults of others. As humans, we are negative and even hostile, or in my case, grumpy. We have a habit of focusing on the bad side of everything, especially the bad side of people. We're pruned to criticize and find fault. It is because we are looking for the perfect person without blemish. Sorry, friends. He who would find a friend without fault will never find one. The reason? Simple. There is no one without fault, and there is no ideal human, only the real person. I constantly hear myself saying, whatever happened to respect? An old saying, if you don't have something nice to say, don't say anything at all. Those phrases are in my mind, ready to pay attention to them. But I too often get that plank in my eye and I do not listen or heed them at all. Well, it's hard to silence a Ficker. Just ask my sister. The appealing thing about fault finding in others is that it takes the focus off our own deficiency and helps us to feel ever so self-righteous. It feels better to criticize others than being criticized ourselves. So when criticizing others, do we remember the hurt we feel when the tables are turned? Instead of criticizing others, why not care for them? We must learn to close our minds to what distracts and listen. Not only to what they are saying, but also to what they are trying to say with or without words. By caring for them, we won't impose our views, our plans, ideas, and our judgment. Good grief, do I really have all the answers? Do I know the pain and confusion going on inside this person? Is my advice or solution really needed at this point? Many of you know I lived in this area on 39th Avenue for 42 years. Bertie and I raised our family in a house that needed lots of repair and updating, and with raising children, there was always a plethora of maintenance. During that time, I had to learn how to handle the fixes myself. We didn't have the income to hire it out, so Bertie handled the brood while I learned how to apply duct tape and spackle. Over time, I learned without YouTube, and I got pretty good at fixing things. I thought I could handle the big task too, soon realizing that time and money and my own limitations put me in my place. Problem here is I could tell you what you ought to do, but all the while never looking inside my own self that I couldn't fix everything, especially me. At times, I wasn't even aware I needed a fix. Today, I continue working on my inner self with the help of my wife, family, and friends. Slowly committing and going in that spiral by listening. It's a process that's taken 72 years, but as Father Jerry said, I'm still trying to spiral up with the time I have left. Given that, to care for others, maybe I won't judge at every opportunity to point out blunders. If I care for them, we can grow in trust, love, and show each other how talented, capable, genuine, creative, friendly, trustworthy, good, and lovable those persons are. If we listen to Jesus and become disciples, it is explained for us. Don't be the blind leading the blind. Listen instead to find out if they need or want guidance. Remember, no disciple is superior to the teacher, but when fully trained, every disciple will be like the teacher. I need to know myself first before taking or reacting to a given stimulus or situation. Jesus asks us to search as carefully as possible for our own faults as we do for the faults of others. When we are aware of our own weaknesses and strive to overcome them, knowing that we also have faults, we are slow to judge and swift to give the benefit of the doubt. The Greek philosopher Socrates said that nature has given us 2 ears, 2 eyes, and only 1 tongue, so that we should hear more than we speak. But in this world, it's the opposite. We speak more and we hear less. So if we cannot say something good about the other person, then it is better to remain silent. Quoting W.G. Benham, speaking without thinking is shooting without aiming. So Ash Wednesday begins this week, and we are also beginning the journey of the Synod 2023. This will be where we learn more, where we, through encountering others, listening to them, and discerning where to go from there. There's much to learn about ourselves. Join me, my friends, in working on care and not judgment. Thank you. 72. Yeah, I put the spackle on this morning. Thank you. So who's next? Who's going to take up the next reflection? Oh, we'll still let Phyllis and Leaf do it.
You know, I want to quote the great Californian philosopher Clint Eastwood. A man's got to know his limitations.
I don't know mine.
That was kind of in my mind as you were going through, right? It's understanding our own limitations, our own shortcomings. That's a challenge.
Tell me about it.
I hear you volunteering.
That was 35.
I hear you volunteering.
Thoughts, questions,
Yeah,
comments?
I'm on the hot seat, so you got your chance.
Yep.
Yeah. First of all, you know, when you start talking about people that you start to judge, one thing I've over the years, you don't know what their baggage is. Mm-hmm. You don't know where they come from, you know. So we all come, some people have harder childhoods than others, and you always have to remember that. So that's something that I would always do is you don't know. So it's hard to judge if you know. And I think as you get older, you start to realize these things. I think that's kind of older maturity. Mm-hmm. To start to realize, look, I don't want to be like this.
As I have to say, my sister will back me up on this. I grew up in a family of 6 kids, and dinner was always a challenge because you had something on your plate, but you were constantly looking at your second helping before finishing the first. And that's kind of how we express ourselves too out there in the real world. We're thinking of the next thing to say while spewing something out first.
I also have 3 kids, and they always bring up doubts and errors. And usually they're right. So maybe people's kids do that. I don't know.
I think that one of the things that this parish has always been really strong in, and years ago when Jack was still here, we really practiced intentional listening and finding out people's story. And the idea behind that was, until you know a person's story, you really cannot and should not even begin to offer any kind of judgment about that person. It's crucial, I think, to have a really deep understanding and communication with your fellow man. Because unless you've got that, you really need to keep your big fat mouth shut about what you may feel is there, are there weaknesses? And I have had that come home to me many times over the years. And it's just something that I really try to teach my kids, my grandkids, you know their story, listen to their story. Once you know that, then you know the person.
Okay, there's Kathy's reflection for next time, folks.
Want to talk about Tom, okay? I know
Yes, it is all about me today.
it's all about you, but you know, we used to be in this parish quite a while ago. Anyway, so Tom came across as, you know, the way Tom comes across, whatever, you never know.
Does anybody
whatever.
here not know that?
But anyway, so there used to be a thing, I don't know if it's still going on, Wednesday evening, whatever.
It's evening
Well,
prayer.
Evening prayer, yeah. Anyway, Tom was one of the speakers this long time ago, and it completely changed. He was honest about himself, about his life, which was not great, you know, lots of things happening in his life, whatever. And so it just changed how at least how I felt about Tom. And it was just wonderful to hear, and it made me, I became to understand why he kind of came across as he did. It was kind of a protection thing, I think, maybe, whatever. But anyway, so it really helped me to get to know Tom and to put that lesson in, you know, what he talked about in practice.
Yes. Thanks, Steve.
You had a lot of self-deprecation in what you had to say, and I know you put a lot of thought in this, but my comment is, if you have a need, if you have a problem, if you have a care, go to Tom.
You might not always get it fixed. Thank you. Thank you.
It's true.
Well, first I want to thank everyone here. I am a relatively newcomer to this parish. And as I get to know all of you more and more, I see the depth of experience, the time that you have put into this parish. And I am really impressed by all the work that you have done. But in terms of this, I wanted to say that the subject doesn't apply only to persons. It could be a topic or a particular subject. I think that we should never express a support or detraction from a particular subject until we really understand it. And that could apply to psychology, to government, to philosophy, or anything like that. And we have to keep that in mind, because nowadays we tend to give our opinions very quickly and alienate a lot of other people in the process.
Thanks for that.
When I was in the 5th grade, we had a new girl come and join our school. And I don't know what there was about her, but I did not care for the way she looked. And it's like, we ended up being best friends by 8th grade. But it was like, we've learned so much how to judge people by the way they look, by how they dress, by things that they've said. And we, a lot of times, don't even know what their name is, but we've already made these preconceived notions about who that person is. And I think in this society, we do that so much. People walking down the street, you go, maybe I'll walk to the other side of the sidewalk because I don't like maybe the color of their skin, or maybe the way they dress, and maybe they smell. And so we try to avoid so many people in our lives anymore. And now with this going on, I don't want to be around anybody because I don't know where they're coming from. And that's a really sad thing, I think, for all of us right now, is how we've kind of isolated ourselves from each other, even people that we know really well.
I'll relate to what Kathy was talking about when we did our intentional listening and when we did our initial outreach where people chose someone's name and we went and visited them and had a conversation. And there had been this person coming, an older woman coming to mass that I didn't know. Just looking at her, you couldn't tell what her nationality or what anything, you know. But I thought, that's in my head, and I'm like, what a weird hairdo, and why does she, you know, I had all these little judgmental things running in my head. And so I didn't know I'd chosen her name, but when I went to visit her, it was such a heartwarming experience because she was very open about sharing her story. She had an amazingly difficult, she was one of those children taken from the Native American family and put into one of those schools where they tried to change them from their identity and her whole life, but she was so open and caring and warm. And so after that, every time I saw her, just, you know, like a heart lifting, what a wonderful lady and what a neat experience that was listening to her story. It changed my entire perspective. Like, you know, you say you don't know someone's story, you don't know where they grew up or what their background was. And when you find some of them are so amazing to know.
How about folks?
Yeah, anyone,
They're on Zoom would like to speak up.
they're on Zoom would like to speak up.
See, I told you I put him to sleep.
I think we're okay. Anybody want the final word? But I do have a final request of you, Tom, but I'll get to that in a moment.
I just want to applaud Tom. I just want to applaud putting himself out there. Putting himself out there. You know,
Yeah,
that's
that's
not
right.
easy to do. It's not easy to
Indeed.
do.
Yes, indeed.